ترجمي. Sorry. Lecture will be in English, if anyone needs translation. أنت بالعربي بس, just in case. I'm going to be talking today about media, terrorism, and populism. Three topics that have been mentioned in different lectures. I will build on different content that was presented by Paul, Moses, today by Claudia, and other of our esteemed keynote speakers and lecturers. I'd like to first offer a warning. There will be some bloody content. I will try to refrain from showing the extreme bloody content and graphicness. There may be some content offensive to different people. Whether it is the use of religious verses or certain images, I will also refrain from using the most offensive content, but I just want to give you a warning. We cannot study this content without at least showing some examples of it to be able to analyze it. And we will be analyzing some of the content that ISIS has produced over the past few years. So I apologize up front if anyone is offended. If you feel the graphicness is too bloody, just cover your eyes for a few moments and it will go away. I want to thank first, before I start, Azza al-Masri, one of our Azza has been, we have been working together on research about ISIS media strategy, media contents for the past about 2 to 3 years approximately, and a big chunk of this lecture is indebted to her and her work, which continues through her master's at Florida University. So thanks, Azza. Let me start with a case study about the Paris attack. Everybody remembers the Paris attack, right? A couple of years ago. Anyone does not know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. Which is scary, and because it shows you how much powerful ISIS are in their media propaganda and terroristic propaganda. So November 12, 2015, that was the day before the Paris attack. A message was sent out. Soon, very soon, the blood will spill like an ocean. Images were put out, text, tweets, a lot of storms on social media happening regarding this. A simple warning. Next day, November 13th in the evening at 9:20 p.m. 4 suicide attacks, shootings at 4 sites in Paris, a hostage situation. That was the next day. Around midnight, the French police stormed the hall where there were hostages, killed the attackers. Some of the attackers blew themselves up. The final outcome, 89 people killed. 1 a.m. or 1:20 a.m., the first tweets hailing ISIS attack on Paris start appearing. Just a few minutes after the whole thing is happening. Mind you, ISIS has not actually announced that this is their operation. Tweets start pouring in from different parts of the world. Some of you can read this in Arabic, some of it is in English, with hashtags, Paris tashtail, Paris is burning, attack on Paris. And notice that image down here with the French flag and a footprint on it. Made me curious. How could somebody create a graphic so quickly right after the attack, or while the attack was actually even happening, and tweet something like this? There's a system that ISIS usually uses when they want to promote certain events, especially attacks. They have a 3-tier system. That's what they call it. This three-tier system, I didn't invent it, I didn't discover it. They actually call it three-tier system. The top tier are the top leadership of ISIS. When they have something happening, these top tier send tweets out, and they tweet each other's tweet. Then the second level, which are the leadership, the middle range leadership of ISIS, they are alerted and they start retweeting each one from the top tier and the second tier. And then the third tier are the general supporters all across the globe. And these get alerted and they start retweeting, creating something that is called a Twitter storm, which brings the trending level all the way up so that these tweets become prominent, mass media grab their attention and start talking about them, achieving maximum exposure. They used to do it manually at first. And then they figured, why wait and rely on people? Maybe they're sleeping, maybe they're not alert, doing something else. So they created an app that people can install, supporters can install. Sometimes non-supporters download by mistake. They actually hacked into some of the systems where people thought they were downloading the FIFA games app, and they actually were downloading pro-ISIS app. And with this Fajr al-Bashair app, once the top leadership tweets something, it just automatically starts retweeting to all your friends on your cell phone or smartphone. Going back to the timeline. November 14, the next day, around noon, ISIS claims officially responsibility for the attack on Paris. They send out a press release. They use the Twitter storm three-tier strategy and achieve maximum exposure. Now, we all know if you put out a link that is extremist or racist, some social media organizations, some media organizations will take it down. They're more savvy to know that. So what they usually do when they put a press release out is they send out a humongous amount of links. In case somebody starts taking down the first one, then there's the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one, etc., 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 etc. There is no way you can stop this press release in time from spreading around the globe. And once one person tweets it, the next person will retweet it, and retweet it, and retweet it. Hundreds of people, thousands of people retweeting all around the globe. By the time you close down all these links, everybody around the globe knows about it. And the mass media actually help in even giving them more exposure on that matter. "3 p.m., just 2 hours after the press release was sent, a repurposed video by ISIS pushed out there, using the same strategy. This video, the purpose was recruitment. So remember, the first message, warning, attack, press release officially claiming recruitment. This is a trend that you will see in many of the ISIS attacks. A systematic trend that follows almost the same trend. I'm going to show you some of the parts of this video. We'll talk about it together. You have sound, right?
Celui qui me croit au tarot et qui croit en Allah a certes saisi l'anse la plus solide qui ne peut se briser, et Allah est celui qui entend et celui qui sait. Quand vous avez m'écrit au tarot, quand vous avez m'écrit à la démocratie et à la loi humaine, en faisant le hijra, aujourd'hui vous m'écroyez à ces tawarith et à toute cette loi que nous a imposé cette tawarith et à tous ces passeports que nous a imposé cette tawarith. Nous m'écroyons en vous. Entre vous et nous, l'inimité et la haine sont apparues jusqu'à ce que vous croyiez à Allah seul. Vous nous avez opprimés, vous avez combattu vos frères qui ont immigré, vos frères français. Qu'attendez-vous? Pourquoi vous n'avez pas encore...
Speaking French, burning their French and European passports, and asking, what are you waiting for? We're fighting. We're achieving something. We're building a khilafah. We're building a state. What are you waiting for? The whole message. What are you waiting for? Join us. You can't come to Syria and Iraq and fight with us? Fight inside Europe. That was the message. This was your religious duty. That was the whole video based on this message. Somewhat good-looking, I would say, charismatic. I'm not good in assessing if men are good-looking, but here we go. At least charismatic. Speaking to a broad public, come and join us. Shaming you. What are you waiting for? After the recruitment video, at 6 p.m. on November 15, 16, messages hailing the victory in Paris, with pictures of people giving out candy, celebrating, meticulous graphics of the Eiffel Tower, Farhat Muslimin bi Ghazwat Paris, the celebration of Muslims in invading Paris. Of course, it's a very far shot from invading even a small block in Paris, but this is how it was promoted. Next day, at 6 p.m., another warning is sent out with extreme graphicness in the middle of it. I'm going to show you this, just the first part of it, and this one with a very blatant sectarian language. Message to the nation of the cross. Notice the immaculate production quality.
A Russian passenger plane flying from Egypt's Sharm el-Sheikh to St. Petersburg has disappeared from the radar.
If it was something that was strong enough to bring the aircraft down, it's going to do a lot of wreckage to the frame, to the airframe.
A Paris evening erupts in violence. Dozens have been killed in shootings and explosions, the deadliest attacks in France in decades.
This is an attack not just on Paris, it's an attack not just on the people of France, but this is an attack on all of humanity and the universal values that we share.
He shot at us for like 10 to 15 minutes. It was a bloodbath.
All right, I'll stop from where it becomes graphic. An explicit and blatant threat. Those who remember the Paris attack, remember that also there was an attack in Beirut, an attack on a Russian plane that was down over Sinai, right? So the media exposure was mainly given to Paris. We know why. I think Claudia was talking about the framing and selection of different frames and the privileged people over the not so privileged like us. But that's a different matter. When it comes to ISIS, they actually highlighted the 3 attacks. In fact, the day after, on November 18, the issue number 12 of David, their extraordinarily professionally produced magazine. I'm going to show you some examples which are shockingly professionally produced. November 18, they released their 12th issue. And it included actually the 3 stories. Paris attack, Russian plane, and the Beirut attack. How many of you have worked in magazines? Raise your hand. How long does it take to produce a magazine, approximately? Oh, that's what you said. How long does it take to produce a magazine? We have with us the publisher and editor of Home magazine. It's how long does it take? A month? More than a month. What about somebody who raised their hand here? About a month. Anyone less than a month? So if the attacks happened just 3 days ago, can you produce a magazine in 3 days? Can you produce a magazine that looks like this in 3 days? I've read quite a few articles in this one. Notice the layout, the professional imagery. You cannot find a single grammar mistake in there, a single punctuation mistake in there. It's well edited, it's well written, well designed, well produced. I mean, this is like Newsweek, Time magazine quality. Of course, it's propaganda. But what does that tell you? How can they produce a magazine in 3 days? It was prepared before. It was prepared. This is a key point. It was prepared before. Think about it. This means when ISIS are planning terrorist attacks, they actually include the media planning within this attack. It's not like the past where you have there's going to be an attack, and once we plan it and do it, we bring in the media people, they maybe record the person who is going to blow himself or herself up or do something like, no. The media person is on the table planning the whole thing. Maybe the media person actually has some input into where we're going to be attacking. This is a major shift. This is a major shift in how non-state organizations actually conduct these things. In the past, only states had the resources to be able to integrate media strategy within the war machinery. A month after that, the whole European Union, France included, plunged into anxiety. Anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment skyrocketed. This is just a headline from The Guardian. Deep anxiety pervades Brussels as lockdown continues. This was when there was an attack on the Brussels airport. Last year, not this summer, last summer, there was what everybody's referring to as a lone wolf attack in Munich at a train station. One of our students, we were in Salzburg, we had 25 LAU students and even actually some JMI students at Salzburg doing studying abroad. And one of our students got trapped because of that. But what we noticed is that suddenly after that attack, the rise in anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment. And we were quite nervous. We told the students, be careful, don't walk around. A lot of the students reported like being looked at in a weird way and suspicious way. You would think that ISIS or any organization that claims Islam as a religion, that they don't want this to happen to Muslims, right? In fact, that's actually one of their goals. And I will explain and elaborate on that in a moment. Increasing hatred towards Muslims does what? Pushes Muslims closer and closer to them, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. This ISIS phenomenon and why the West is most interested in it, I'm interested in it because they're literally 2 hours away from us. At least they were a few days ago. And I'm worried, and I don't want an extremist state close to our lovely country and region. But the world is now occupied with ISIS. And I know they're on retreat. I know Mosul is taken, Raqqa is about to fall soon, and they're on retreat. But this does not change anything. Because ISIS is a certain phenomena that built on existing grievances, existing problems, and these problems still exist. And most likely, another group is going to come up and take up this strategy and this cause, which is problematic. They were able to recruit, by just 2015, like the second year in existence, 30,000 foreign fighters from 100 countries. Some of them are women, many of them are Westerners, some of them even converted to Islam, were not even Muslims. This is a graphic from The Economist. Those who know the history of ISIS know that it was a group that splintered from Al-Qaeda. They disagreed with them on many issues, including when to declare the Khilafah, when is it time to act. ISIS leadership decided this is the time to do it. The world is plunging in chaos. There's a political vacuum in Syria and Iraq. We have an opportunity, and there's a lot of new tools we have. digital and social media, and they use that in a very deft way. And it's quite interesting that before 2013, that name, ISIS, didn't even exist. They were able to skyrocket to fame and maximum exposure in a very, very short time. How did they do it? The case study that I gave you elaborates on their strategy and tactics. They synchronize media with their war machine, but they do something else. They use populist strategies too, and I'm going to talk about that partly because a lot of the other lecturers refer to this problem, and partly because this is a problem around the world today. Populism is not only a problem that we have in this part of the world, but in Europe, the US, all across the globe. Populist leaders, populist politicians are gaining power using destructive strategies that build on hatred, that build on people's anxieties, people's racism, people's sectarianism. But I want to invite you first to think of ISIS as not a just group of crazy evil people. That will be very counterproductive because they are very rational in their thinking, very strategic. They use immaculate tactics. 1 + 2 = 3. There's no crazy irrationality going on here. If we think of crazy irrationality, it's very hard to understand what they're doing. So let's try to think of them as a virtual state, since they aspire to build a state. And there's plenty of literature to talk about this. This is not my idea. I got it from an article in the Foreign Affairs that differentiated between Al-Qaeda and ISIS, called ISIS actually Al-Qaeda 2.0. Philip C. talks about virtual states in different ways. Diaspora, Lebanese in America, for example, they create some form of a virtual state that can be targeted for resources by the Lebanese government to bring tourists, to bring money back. A de facto nation, Palestine, Kurdistan, groups that are aspiring to establish a state. Or non-state actors, NGOs, international NGOs, and unfortunately terrorist groups, or whatever you want to call them. This will help us move more towards rationality and analyzing ISIS as, instead of a crazy group of killers and terrorist group, as actually a virtual state that uses terrorism. I'll get to the point why this is very important. I know that politicians like to use a lot of this rhetoric to galvanize people against a cause or for a cause, but this is not what we should be thinking about. This is very misleading, will actually help their cause. Let's talk a little bit about populism. Populism have swept big parts of Europe today and the US, unfortunately. Again, building on hateful rhetoric. But I want to attack populism from a more specific point of view. Demagoguery. Al-Ghawgha'iyya. Right? Populism is Sha'wawiyya. Demagoguery, Al-Ghawgha'iyya. Sorry, translators. I know you're doing a great job. What is populism from that point of view? It's gaining power or gaining popularity, or credibility if you want, by exploiting people's fears, prejudices, grievances, divisions, beliefs, identities, and aspirations, and presenting oneself as a solution or alternative or a protection to a corrupt elite or to the status quo or to a certain threat. Think about it. I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble a lot in Lebanon. Most Lebanese politicians build on this because we have a sectarian system. People from your own religious sect will vote for you. So the more you terrify this small sect and tell them your small religion is going to be eaten alive by all the other religion, the more likely they're going to see you as the savior, the more likely they're going to come and group together. This, I just told you the story of Lebanese elections in the past 50 years. Now, our point here is more about the media, more than populism itself. I'm not a political scientist. I like to study politics and media. Mazzolini is one of the authorities on this topic, on populism and media, and I definitely invite you to reading his book, The Media and Neo-Populism, if you're interested in this topic. He says, all neo-populist movements rely heavily on the complicity with the mass media. And all are led by politicians who are shrewd and capable newsmakers themselves. This makes sense, right? You cannot have populism without mass media today, right? And if you're not very savvy with the media, you're going to fail, especially in this era of social media. He says media and populism have a symbiotic relationship. What does the symbiotic relationship mean? They feed off of each other. They rely on each other. So it's not just the populist, it's not just the politician that is benefiting from the media. It's actually the media benefiting from populism, from the politician, from whatever that person is saying. This is going to come full circle when we talk about terrorism. Now, terrorism actually relies on media. It cannot exist without media. These three components are symbiotic. They rely on each other. Populism, terrorism, and media. And if you can put the three of them together, you create enormous resources of power. And this is what I believe ISIS is doing. But let's go back a little bit to populism and media. What are the elements that weaken media in the face of populism? Media don't intentionally promote populist rhetorics, hateful rhetoric, that builds on fear, that builds on sectarianism, that builds on racism. They do it because they're put in a certain dilemma where they need to get audiences to make profit, and this is the only way to do it. They have no other better content, or maybe that's what they claim. So there are four elements that weaken media in the face of populism. The market logic and dwindling profits. Mass media are closing down, right? We had the Safir close down in Lebanon a few months ago. All over the world, newspapers are closing down. TV stations are facing major losses. Radio stations the same. They're moving to podcasting. This legacy media is struggling to survive financially. So they are willing to put anything and everything up there to attract audiences and regain some of the profits, some of the revenues. This weakens media in the face of populism. Blurred line between politics and entertainment. Dr. Kozman, Claudia was talking about that a few moments ago. Was it the Kardashians example? Is that news? No. When a politician goes and says something sexist about a journalist, she looks ugly or she cheated on her husband, is that news? That's sensation. But guess what? That attracts clicks, that attracts audiences. Fake news and post-fact society. This is the society we are living in right now. We spoke a lot about fake news, so I'm not going to talk about it. But this perception that there are facts for me that are very different from facts for you, and we can both believe in these facts to be actually true, this is the world we live in today. And this feeds further into this populist rhetoric where somebody could just put a statement out there and you will bet that, what, 1, 2, 3% of the public will believe it? That's enough. Because the public are fragmented, which is the last point. The lost credibility of the legacy of the mass media. In our part of the world, in the Arab world, we look at Western media as being Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, right? Especially US media. In the US, for example, there's this perception that the legacy media have a liberal bias, and politicians use that. President Donald Trump, for example, used that during his election campaign. This is a shot from 2010, a long time ago. US to issue terror warning to Americans in Europe. You don't need to read beyond. Where's that image? It's Paris, Eiffel Tower, right? We all recognize that brand. Well, actually, this was the original image, right? This is an example of how we believe the Western media portray us, right? We are the terrorists. Two tourists walking around. It happens that one of them is wearing a niqab. I'm not sure actually if it's hijab or niqab. She's a terrorist, along with whoever is walking with her, right? They withdrew it for, later, but I can build on this. I can use this to build on your bias towards the perception of Western media and attack Western media. This is, again, also, not to hit too much on President Trump, but this is a strategy that he used, attacking media and building on existing biases among the audience, among the public. What does ISIS use as its rhetoric? What is their rhetorical strategy? I've been able to bring it down to 3 matters. And this is based on analysis of their blueprint. I'm going to show you in a moment. The corrupt status quo. The state of Muslims today, the state of Arabs today, the state of Middle Easterners today. This is not fake. We are living in countries that were divided by the Western governments after World War II, poor economy, corrupt regimes, dictators, puppets to the Western world, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Palestinians humiliated on a daily basis, etc., etc., etc. I haven't said one word that I think most of you don't believe in. That is actually the status quo. This is key. Think about advertising. Advertising uses real problems, real grievances, and uses them against you to sell you products. ISIS uses real grievances, real problems to recruit you. It's a very well-known strategy. It's not something they actually invented. Alternatives. The status quo is corrupt, is bad. We're the solution. And this works great when there are no other solutions. After a long era of Arab development and Arab nationalism, and then suddenly Arab dictators and persecution and authoritarianism, and suddenly the Arab uprisings, all other solutions have lost credibility. Secularism in the Arab world is bankrupt today. There's no solution. There's nothing to aspire for. Even the Arab uprisings brought us people who are not the ones we actually want. No, not more democracy, not more freedom of the press, not economic prosperity. They brought us disasters. They brought us war, right? I don't want to go into the Arab uprisings argument. We can stay here for 5 hours talking about that. But what I'm talking about is a vacuum in ideology. There is no alternative ideology for all of us to aspire for. If you think 30 years ago, Arab nationalism was there, right? So the Ba'ath Party in Syria and in Iraq galvanized a lot of people. Abdel Nasser in Egypt, across the Arab world, there's this great ideology. We are building, we are growing, there's this aspiration towards unity, and suddenly all of that disappeared. Not just disappeared, it's bankrupt, right? When somebody talks to you about this now, please, don't talk to me about that, we experienced that. So ISIS comes up with this solution. We're going to create a khilafah. And they actually do it. We'll talk about that in a moment. The third one is polarization. And this is important to understand within the context of terrorism and populism and media. They build on something that I call eliminating the gray. If you think of black and white, people with us, people against us. You're either with us or against us, right? The George Bush speech. This is a polarizing speech. A speech that brings people towards you and puts your enemies away from you. And puts people in the middle who don't want to be part of this in a very tough dilemma. It's like, I'm with the good or with the bad. It's like, no, both of you are bad, I don't want to deal with that. But no, ISIS tries to push people towards these two polar opposites and creates this vision of the world that you are either with the right people or with the wrong people. This is not something that I analyze, it's something that's actually written in a blueprint document called Managing of Savagery. Idarat Tawahush, right? I think you got it right. This document was created prior to the existence of ISIS and was adopted by ISIS later. And I've highlighted a few things that I will read in a moment, but instead of me talking about it, I'm going to show you a very quick video that summarizes what it's all about. terrifying with that added music too. So I highlighted a few things here. I'm not going to read them in Arabic. I will read the translation in English from that specific document. What we mean by polarization here is pushing nations toward a battle wherein polarization takes place among all the people, where one side joins the righteous and another side joins the evil. And the third neutral side waits for the battle's outcome before joining the victorious. And we must attract this third group. Pushing nations into battle requires more military operations that force people to enter battle whether they want it or not. So societies turn into two viciously battling sides. In the early phase, when opposition media are strong, we must send messages before military operations are conducted in order to justify them. Remember the messages first? The purpose is to justify. We're going to get to that. Then, opposition media will eventually fail to control and distort its coverage as the frequency and magnitude of operations increases. The more operations, the more media coverage, the less control of media. Remember how populism can weaken media? In the final phase, we must propagate how safe, how just, and organized the areas we control are. And that's when people will flock into our areas to join us. And I'm going to show you examples of that. So my point here is that the media operation that ISIS run is not random. It's very strategic, it's very intentional, it's very rational. And one thing we haven't noted, we've been talking a lot about mass media, but we haven't talked about populism and social media. There was a study conducted a few months ago by the Brookings Institute across Europe and the US. And it showed that politicians, even those who did not win elections, populist politicians had much higher ranking in social media compared to their centrist opponents. Here's an example. That blue line up there, that's Le Pen. Look at the other politicians. Now in the US, Trump did win on this populist ticket. In France, she didn't win. Here are some elements that relate to social media and populism specifically. What are the elements that make social media favorable to populism? One, no gatekeepers. I think Claudia was talking about that. Framing, right? It's the gatekeepers who frame. It's the journalists who frame. With social media, anyone could put out whatever frames they want out there. So there's a lack of control over the frame. And if by everyone I mean an organized group of people like ISIS, they have a lot of resources to be able to frame how you see things, how you see reality. Short, quick messages work well with social media. Mexicans are rapists. 3 words. That was unfortunately a statement that was uttered by a politician. I did not say that, just for the record. This is being recorded, right? Try to respond to that. Well, that is racist, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I'm running out of words on Twitter, I can't respond anymore. These short, hateful sentences and statements are very conducive to social media. Filter bubbles and selective exposure. I think these are 2 theories that we spoke about enough here in the lectures. Moses spoke about that, Paul spoke about it. The filter bubble, how algorithms and social media make us become part of a small group of like-minded people, living in an echo chamber. We put a message out there, we have 100 likes from people who think like us. And eventually we stop hearing the ideas of people who don't think like us. Right? This is how the internet works today with all these search mechanisms and algorithms, and how Google and Facebook actually filter people who are different from you out. It's an algorithmic bias. And we already have something that psychologists call selective exposure. In Lebanon, people who support a certain political party follow that media, that party's media, right? We select to be exposed to things that are agreeable to us, that supports our inner thoughts. In social media, this is actually exponentially worse. Fragmented, contradictory messages. So I referred to this before. So I can put a hateful message about let's turn this a little bit sectarian in Lebanon, about Maronites and send it out to channels of social media that mostly Maronites will see. And then put another hateful message against Druze and put it out in channels against Druze. Most likely with this filter bubble phenomenon, this network will actually not interact with this network. And this message will go uninterrupted, unchallenged to this network, and the same thing with the second one. And I will have achieved popularity among two groups, although I'm actually using messages that are hateful and racist towards them, right? This is the problem today with social media too. Crowdsourcing. You don't have enough people to work, you don't have enough staff, that's okay, you have supporters out there. All they have to do is push your messages. They will help you. They will also actually do some remixes and create some memes, right? Jennifer and JR and Amanda were talking about that yesterday. And finally, the global reach. We all know about that we can send a message that could reach anywhere across the globe. But with populism, there was a phenomenon lately where, for example, US citizens would join Le Pen's social media and propel the messages that were sent by that campaign just to push this global populist movement. It's quite interesting. So how can we apply this? I mean, saying something racist about Mexicans, about Maronites or Druze is one thing, but slaughtering people on camera is something totally different, right? Mass media are not going to be putting this up, or maybe they will. Why is that? This is where we cue in the third element, and probably the most important element in this lecture. Terrorism. What is terrorism? Anyone? I want two statements. What is terrorism? Go ahead, back there. Sorry? Political violence against citizens. Anyone else? One more. Go ahead.
ترويع الناس.
ترويع الناس. Okay, terrifying people. One more? Okay, just one here. Very short one, okay?
الاعتداء على الآخرين بدون مبرر أي منطقي أو قانوني.
Okay, so attacking people without any logical or rational justification. Okay, well, thanks. It's actually a lot more than that. Let me give you a classic definition by Wilkinson. A premeditated act, planned in advance, or threat. You don't have to attack. You can threaten people with terrorism. Designed to create a climate of extreme fear, directed at a wider target than the immediate victims. This is key. Directed at a wider target than the immediate victims. Inherently involves random or symbolic targets, especially civilians, used primarily to influence governments, communities, or specific social groups. What do we mean by directed at a wider target than the immediate victims? Go ahead. Spreading fear, but what does that mean? What does it mean that it's not directed at the immediate victims? Okay. Okay. Exactly. So, la samah Allah, somebody comes in and blows themselves up. It's not going to happen. We have security out there. Are we the direct victims? We are the immediate victims, right? Are we the actual target of terrorism? Who is the target? The university, probably the Lebanese population, probably the certain political group in Lebanon. But how does that work? If the attack happened on us, how does that work? But how does it work? How does this fear spread? Through media. That is the key. Terrorism cannot exist without media. If it happens here and nobody covers it, or even if they cover it, but not with graphic images, the fear does not work. It doesn't spread. You've heard that statement before, if a tree, philosophical statement, 101, if a tree falls in the desert and nobody knew about it, did it actually happen? If terrorism occurs and media don't cover it, it didn't actually take place. It's not terrorism. It's an assassination or something that was controlled. This creates a big problem for journalists. I know many of you here are journalists. NACO says media comprise terrorism's oxygen. The media can actually suffocate terrorism. But given what I was talking about before, the failure in generating revenues and the economic model we have right now, it's not going to happen. I'd like to introduce a concept that I refer to as the duality of terrorism. It's very important to understand this from the ISIS strategy point of view. The duality of terrorism is defined as the following. When you conduct a terrorist attack, you are actually achieving two things. First one, you are actually attracting recruits. I'm going to explain that. The second one is easy. You are spreading fear, right? You are terrifying your enemies. We saw how the Iraqi army was terrified and fled Mosul, right? A few years ago. Sorry, my Iraqi colleagues here, I don't mean to pick on you. But that was based on fear. That was not based on ISIS's military prowess. But how do we use terrorism to attract people? Terrorism is such a quote-unquote evil, black, dark thing, right? It's attracting attention. It's getting media exposure, right? It's attracting credibility. And this is the duality of terrorism. You conduct it and you achieve these two things simultaneously. You terrify your opponents and you attract more of your supporters or potential supporters. I'm going to elaborate on that point of recruitment in a moment. But let me just digress a tiny bit here and talk a little bit about the dilemma of covering terrorism. Do we cover it? Do we not cover it? If we cover terrorism, we are actually serving the group who is conducting terrorism, right? Giving them more exposure. But what else are we doing? We are helping people protect themselves. Something happening around here at LAU, let's say a shooting, it's our duty as journalists to cover it, tell people to stay away, don't come here, make sure maximum information is out there so the security come in, the army comes in and protects the citizens, right? But at the same time, what are we doing? We are serving the exact purpose of the terrorists, right? To achieve maximum fear and maximum exposure. Go ahead.
هو الفرق بين أنه يكون الإعلام خادم للإرهاب أو إعلام مناهض للإرهاب هو في طريقة التأطير، في طريقة معالجة الخبر. فلما نركز على أطر الأسباب وأطر الحلول، أطر تفادي هذه الظاهرة، هنا نحن نكون ضد الإرهاب. لما نركز على أطر النتائج وقوة الإرهاب، فهنا نحن نقوم بالدعاية للإرهاب. فطريقة معالجة الحدث هو الفيصل بين أن يكون الإعلام يلعب أحد الدورين.
Thank you. So what our colleague was saying is that it depends on the framing and how we frame it. And I would somewhat agree, but no matter what we do with terrorism, the moment we cover it, you're achieving at least certain goals that the terrorists are aiming for. You can limit and minimize that. And I'll use an example in a moment. Let me show you, let me remind you of 9/11, for example. How can you limit this frame? There's no way in the world any media can frame this in any other way. A plane, two planes plunging into the most visible building in the most economically progressed city in the world. There's nothing you can do about this. And it was covered because not only the mass media were covering it, because it's a tourist attraction with millions of cameras pointed to it at any moment in time. And they did choose the rush hour morning to guarantee absolute maximum exposure. Same thing with the train stations. These are not random locations to attack. These are locations and targets that are attacked for their media value, for their exposure value. Even when it comes to, give me 1 second and I'll get some feedback from you. Even when it comes to executing people on camera. So this is the image of UK humanitarian aid worker Alan Henning in 2014. The Independent could have put this image, right? And served the message. Instead they put this. On Friday, a decent, caring human being was murdered in cold blood. Our thoughts are with his family. He was killed on camera for the sole purpose of propaganda. Here is the news, not the propaganda. But how many of us actually are able to do this? How many media are able to do this? And I'm going to give you examples from our part of the world. I'll use AJ Plus as an example. Is Doha here? She works for AJ Plus. I'm not trying to attack you guys. Is there sound?
We can all agree on. The Islamic State...
Hold on. Let me just repeat that.
There's one thing we can all agree on. The Islamic State group propaganda machine is absolutely terrifying, but it's effective. As we speak, their media center is producing slick, multilingual, Hollywood-esque videos and distributing them on social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr. Their recorded beheadings and mass slaughters are too many to ignore. But just like our colleagues at other news organizations, we at AJ Plus face a dilemma. How do we report news about ISIS, especially in the absence of independent journalists on the ground? How should we handle their pornographic violence, their news programs, and their softer, more emotional messages? It's all clearly intended to manipulate the world's perception of them. Should we rebroadcast it on our platforms? Should we ignore it and refuse to engage with it altogether? If this is our generation's information war, how do we win? Where as journalists do we position ourselves on that battlefield? Propaganda in wartime is nothing new. It's used to strike fear in the hearts of enemies and break down their will to fight. It also maintains unity and goodwill among allies banded together for a common goal. The Nazis were experts at it. So are the Russians, the Israelis, the Chinese, and the Americans.
Weapons of mass destruction.
The list goes on. But the tactics of modern propaganda have changed, even in just the last few years. It wasn't too long ago that Osama bin Laden had to find a middleman to deliver his grainy VHS tapes from his cave to a media outlet willing to broadcast his messages. Even then, journalists ultimately decided what was or wasn't shared with the world. But that isn't up to us anymore. Social media has democratized the spread of information. Anyone, anywhere, can post a message. The perceived success of ISIS is through these tools, and this strategy is problematic for journalists. Their propaganda has crowded out independent journalists who undermine their narrative, and reporting on this conflict is deadly. The recorded beheadings of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff were meant to horrify Western audiences and grab our attention, but they also sent a clear message to other reporters: don't come here, or you'll pay with your life. It's also a message many Syrian and Iraqi journalists have been forced to confront, as ISIS tries to silence them with threats, kidnapping, and execution. Even more complicated is their approach. They've crafted a central message that isn't just spread through videos of savagery. They try to control their own narrative using a diversity of voices, news programs hosted by hostages to tell their own version of events, to pictures of their daily lives using selfies or cats to balance media reports of their brutality. Many of our colleagues in the industry have participated in a media blackout anytime a brutal video emerges. For some, that means not using ISIS's footage in conveying the news. Others incorporate still images from the videos because they feel that it conveys the broader story with less of the propaganda. When news of James Foley's execution broke, AJ Plus chose to show bits from the video. We reacted in the moment, but we have since reversed that decision.
I think we became aware of the terrible theatricality of what ISIS was doing with their video, and that with each successive offering, we drew back. And I think now we're very comfortable with talking about it, but without being part of this kind of theatrical presentation.
That's actually quite scary that AJ Plus didn't realize about the theatricality of ISIS up until that moment. And in fact, there was a global media approach to stifling ISIS's propaganda. And ISIS realized that. Because, okay, how many heads are you going to cut off on camera? And that's boring. A few weeks later, I was called to be interviewed on Al Jazeera, not the AJ Plus Doha, so I'm not going to comment on that. And in the background, while interviewing me, they had the video of the Jordanian pilot who was caught and burned alive playing. I was like, what are you doing? You just said that you're not going to be actually helping them propagate. So ISIS figured out that just cutting people's heads on camera is not going to work. So they upped the game. This is the problem with the dilemma of covering terrorism. So if you think of one extreme, if you don't cover it, you're doing two things. You're not serving the public and you're putting people at risk. Imagine that the media were not covering the Paris attack and people were walking into that nightclub. There would have been probably triple the number of victims, right? The other thing that you are, is that me or, okay. The other thing that you are doing, you are pushing these groups to up the ante, to bring it even up to a higher level. And this is what happened with ISIS. Cutting heads wasn't enough. I'm going to create a Hollywood quality level film burning somebody alive. We're going to watch a little bit of that. I promise not to show you the moment where the burning happens because it's quite graphic and grotesque. And it's a human being in the end. But we really have to understand the quality of production. But before I show you that video, it's important to understand Wolfsfield's conception or theory about, or equation if you want to call it, about turning political power into power over the media. Governments have a lot of power over the media. Non-state actors don't. If any one of you as an activist or a group of people who have a cause want to get media exposure, it's extremely difficult. You have to plan, you have to strategize, you have to get a lot of resources, you have to bring a lot of people in, you need people to tweet, do Facebook, you need the website, you need credibility before you can get minimal exposure. So what Wolfsfield said is that the value to the media divided by the dependence of the media. The more you have value to the media and the less you are dependent on the media, the more likely you'll have power over the media. And this relates also to the quality of your content. So not only are you using terrorism to crash through all the gatekeepers and get exposure, but you are also offering incredible content. And I'm not talking about the graphics, I'm not talking about the cinematography, I'm not talking about the editing, not talking about the music, I'm talking about storytelling. I'm talking about Hollywood-style storytelling. And we're going to watch that together very quickly. So you all know what I'm referring to. A Jordanian pilot his plane was hit and he parachuted into Syria. He was caught by ISIS and later executed. Let's watch together small segments of this video. And as we go, think about the story curve. The climactic moment, building the tension, building the level of tension throughout the story until a peak moment, and then the anti-climactic moment. This is something we teach in our journalism classes, in our creative writing classes.
Volunteer, please step forward. Every single pilot raised his hand and stepped forward.
على وقع الحملات الصليبية على ديار الإسلام أعمل الجراحون ضعف فانتدب عماله ليشيدوا صروحا تزخر بالردة والعمالة وكان من بينها إحدى دول الطوق التي ما فتئ سدنتها يجددون الطاعة والولاء في كل مرة وحين.
All right, so the first segment, let's keep the lights and keep the lights down, please. Thank you. Keep them off. So the first part of the video starts by establishing the problem, justifying all these Arab dictators who are serving the West, the puppet regimes, right? And they're talking about the King of Jordan here specifically. And then we move on.
فما إن أعلن عن حلف دولي لوقف امتداد دولة الخلافة كانت الأردن من السباقين والداعمين له بل والمشاركين.
All right, so they started. The moment that the Khilafah was announced, the Jordanian state decided they're going to attack. And they show here a lot of images with the Jordanian king shaking hands with Western leaders.
ويشفي صدور قوم مؤمنين.
This is the operation.
أعلن تنظيم الدولة الإسلامية اليوم أن مقاتليه تمكنوا من إسقاط طائرة حربية تابعة للتحالف الدولي في جنوب شرقي مدينة الرقة.
All right, so we're going through a story. Historically, Arab governments sold their duties towards their citizens to the West, people conspiring against Islam and serving the West, and then here suddenly we are starting to hear what's happening on the ground in a chronological order. And then we have the pilot.
من طائرة سلاح الجو الملكي لمهمة عسكرية.
الطائرة التي كان يقودها الطيار الأردني معاذ الكساسبة.
أنا الملازم أول طيار معاذ صافي يوسف الكساسبة.
Here are the details.
أردني الجنسية من الكرك.
All of this to establish credibility, justification and credibility, using news footage to establish credibility, using details about the pilot to establish credibility that they know who this person is. They know every single detail about who this person is. And then for about 10 minutes, we listen to the operation that he conducted. Just to prove that, oh, you started it. You attacked us. And now we're going to be responding. All of this, justification and building credibility. And here is the global power structure and how the Arab regimes serve this global structure of Western powers. Now I'm going to jump ahead to the moment where right before the climactic moment. We see Muaz al-Kasasbi walking around the rubble in a place that supposedly is the place that he bombed, or these airplanes bombed. And we see cutting between two different stories. That's called parallel editing in filmmaking. Sorry for the graphicness here. So of course, notice the advanced editing and graphic techniques and sound. Parallel editing is often used to tell two stories at the same time when one of them is too boring to tell on its own. But it also attaches the two stories together. So here you see the evidence of people killed. Supposedly this pilot killed these people, or the bombing killed these people, and he is regretfully walking around. Right? All this to justify. I know there's a lot of rhetoric that says, oh, they kill people without justification. ISIS actually puts a lot of effort into justifying their acts and into building on the real grievances that we referred to before. I'll show you a little bit more of the high quality production of the climactic moment. Okay, notice the suspense now. I'm going to bring the sound up a little bit. Notice the heartbeat. Multi-camera angle shooting. Slow motion. next point. So they do burn him alive, and they bring a bulldozer that stomps on his prison, and then the anticlimactic moment where they list all these other pilots and give their audience a bounty. If you can kill these, we will give you thousands of dollars. So there's the action part at the end. So, I mean, I was even watching when, that'd be right before that climactic moment. Even those of you who are on laptops and cell phones, you were like glued to the screen. You can't take your eyes off of it. So this is how they upped the ante. This is how they brought their terrorism level all the way up to break through these media gatekeepers again. Now, one more thing about ISIS's recruitment, because all of this, in the end, the goal is recruitment and state building. No matter how much exposure and credibility they get, if they don't get boots on the ground, people fighting with them, they've lost. So think about the media systems that we've been through in the past 30, 40 years. So the pre-internet era, there was one gatekeeper. Claudia was talking about that and the framing and how much power they had in framing reality for you. Telling you not only what to think about, but how to think about it. There was a one-to-many model. Then the first era of the internet, maybe the early 1990s all the way till late 1990s, where you can create these crude websites if you had the expertise, etc. And there was a weakening of the gatekeeper here. It was more of a many towards many, but it was still one-way communication. The interaction was very weak. With the Web 2.0 era, with the social media era, now it's not only a many-to-many, but it's a many-to-many who could be targeted as groups, as individuals. How does the recruitment often work? Yes, some people watch the videos, buy into the cause, and try to fly to Iraq and Syria to fight with ISIS. But quite often, there's something actually happening under the radar that we don't really know about, that has only been exposed lately. There is an army of recruiters among ISIS who are online, dealing with individuals on an individual basis. I'm going to give you an extreme example of this young woman from rural United States of America. Has nothing to do with ISIS, with Islam, with the Arab world at all. We're going to watch a video about the attempt to recruit her.
The first thing they told me was I was not allowed to listen to music. The second thing they told me is like how to pray. They did tell me that it is a sin to stay in non-Muslim lands if you have a chance to go to Muslim lands. Because why would we stay in the land of disbelievers and doubters? I live in like a modular home with my grandparents, and it's in the middle of nowhere. We lived in the city, we could walk wherever we wanted, and here it was a lot better in a lot of ways because it was safer, but it was also, because it was also safer, it was a lot more boring. I've met my friends on the internet. I have more community with them than I have with people in my own community. I was looking for people who agreed with what they were doing so I could understand why they were doing it. And it was actually really easy to find them. Faisal, he's my friend. He always answered my questions. He always brought up things against Christianity, but in a kind way.
can watch this online. It's called Flirting with the Islamic State or Flirting with Extremism. It's a New York Times video. What happened in the end, the FBI interferes and keeps tracking the person who was on the other side of the computer, talking to her, was sending her gifts, sending her money, and inviting her to come. Eventually, she tells him, I have the FBI here. He cuts the communication with her. And this is an extreme example. Imagine if they were able to get to someone in rural United States of America, a white 23-year-old woman, and I'm specifying this because she has absolutely no connection to the Muslim world, to the Muslim religion, to the Arab world, to this part, to any politics in here. And he was able to build this relationship with her over time. So imagine if there are people who potentially already are leaning towards certain beliefs, or who have the grievances that we all have about this part of the world. It's actually quite terrifying, and I didn't realize this until my daughter receives one of these videos, and I'll show you, on her cell phone. Actually, her friend's cell phone. I didn't let my kids get cell phones until they were above 12. ISIS intentionally tries to create content to attract kids. Here's the alphabet. And you can see all the friendly images that are attached to the alphabet. Mim, madfa, sad, sarukh, tah, tal'a, dad, baba, be, bunduqiyya. Of course, there's others. I just put those as an example. My daughter walks up to me once and tells me there's this video that my friend is showing them on her friend is showing them on their cell phone. And I look it up.
Let's talk about music. I dig blues music. We don't like children's music. No, no, no.
What music are you into? I like this. It's very grown up.
صليل الصوارم نشيد الأباب ودرب القتال طريق الحياة فبين اقتحام يبيد الطغاة وكتيم صوت جميل صدى صليل الصوارم نشيد الأباب ودرب القتال طريق الحياة فبين اقتحام يبيد الطغاة وكتيم صوت جميل صدى
So I don't know who produced this. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't track it down. I don't know if it was if this was produced by pro-ISIS or anti-ISIS, but regardless, it is promoting the message. It is promoting the brand. And this is where I want to get into. I want to get into ISIS branding. That's the last point. Using any media necessary. Any media necessary. You'll be surprised. Anything they can do, you will use it. For kids, for grown-ups, anything. You all know what branding is, right? You've heard of branding. What is this? It's an apple, right? We eat it every day and... No? It's not. What does this represent? But what does it really represent? I have a Mac. Just technology? Innovation, quality, durability, expensive, status. That's a brand. What is this? Romance. Have you been to Paris? I've been multiple times. I've never seen romance. I've seen a lot of trash sometimes. Anyway. But where did this romance come from? Movies. These movies that build a brand for a state or for a city. I did this research about Brand Dubai and how the state of Dubai is branding itself in the world. Cities and states brand themselves intentionally in a certain way. They use the Olympics sometimes. They use big events, big media events to brand themselves. ISIS is not too far away from that. They have their brand. It's a very evil and dark brand, but it's a brand that attracts certain people. Look at these 4 images. The consistency in the orange jumpsuits. What does the orange jumpsuit represent? It's the Guantanamo prisoners, right? they're turning the tables, basically. 4 different areas that were disconnected geographically when these shots were taken. Do you know how much it takes to produce jumpers, that many jumpsuits that look the same with the same color? They have some intentionality when it comes to their visual identity. I mean, it took me a year to have our department have one consistent visual identity. Imagine this group with thousands and upon thousands of people across the globe have already established a visual identity in their graphics. The funny thing about brands is they are so durable, so powerful that even when you attack them, you are serving them. This is a different group of Syrian jihadists, quote unquote, who actually didn't like ISIS and they turned the tables on them, right? They're executing the ISIS soldiers. And through that, they're actually serving that same brand. You attack Apple, you're actually serving the brand of Apple and making it even more and more popular, because you've heard of the word, any publicity is good publicity, right? Including bad publicity. The name is out there. You're giving them credibility. You're giving them exposure in their magazines. So after Dabiq, and after the Turkish army started encroaching on the area of Dabiq, right, the historic geographic area up in northern Syria, they decided maybe it would be bad for our image to keep that name. We're going to change the name to something different, Rumiya, referring to Rome, or Roman. But they also use positive branding imagery. I'm going to show you a video produced by Azza a few years ago. She was still a student back then.
ISIS wants you to know that they're just like you. By giving voice to locals
الحمد لله رب العالمين الأوضاع تمام والأحوال جيدة.
And to foreigners.
الحمد لله aujourd'hui on a créé un khilafa islamique.
Ein Leben im Gehorsam voller
By going behind the scenes. By showing you that life is normal in the Islamic State. And close-ups so you can relate. They just want to rid the world of the bad guys.
Je voudrais aussi conseiller à mes frères et sœurs fillah de quitter ces pays de Tawarid.
Und ein Schrecken für Kuffar, und ein Schrecken für Kuffar.
And you are already there. The camera is your eyes. If you join, you'll be rewarded by God for honorable deeds.
Allah gepriesen und erhaben, versprach seinem Diener die Rückkehr der Scharia, ad-Dawlatul Islam.
And you live a happy life in the Islamic State.
الشعب مرتاح الحمد لله بوجود الدولة الإسلامية.
So in addition to these positive images and videos, if you remember the document that I showed you, the 5th stage is to show that our areas are safe, there's abundance to attract more people. That is the 5th stage that they imagine themselves to be in. They have also hacked into popular video games and changed them to put their own soldiers, their own fighters, attacking the enemy. I'll show you some few examples. Everybody knows Grand Theft Auto. How many people play it? Oh my gosh. I thought only men play this. That's a sexist statement, I apologize. They not only hack the weapon, the graphics, they hack the weapons and change them to use these typical weapons that they use.
لدرب الكما فإما حياة تسر الهدى الله أكبر العزة لله سوى الله أكبر
attacks on airports and train stations, inspiring these lone wolf attacks. Some of them are pretty graphic. I'm not showing you the graphic ones. And these are games you can actually go online, download and play, or you can play online with other people. They've also used their own hackers to hack into different prestigious organizations or credible organizations around the world. Here, they actually hacked into CENTCOM, the US Central Command, and they've also been hacked. Here, Anonymous hacked into them and put some pornographic images. But again, going back to the branding issue, once you establish this brand, once you establish this credibility, it is very hard to repel, it is very hard to make the attacks that come on it not serve it. I don't know if that made any sense. Once you cover ISIS, once you cover their terrorism, even when you critique them, it's the same issue that we were talking about a couple of days ago, covering the populist, when Moses showed you the front of the New York Times, with every single article covering Donald Trump, right? It's a dilemma. You cannot escape it. You have to cover it, right? I'm going to end with this video before I make a final statement that makes fun of ISIS, but at the same time promotes its cause. It uses its own nasheed. يبيد الطغاة وكتيم صوت جميل صدى صليل الصوارم نشيد الهباء ودرب القتال طريق الحياة فبين اقتحام يبيد الطغاة وكتيم صوت جميل صدى صليل الصوارم نشيد الهباء ودرب القتال طريق الحياة. It's a bit funny and scary at the same time. So to end with a statement by Philip C. Bandana Jambak, both colleagues in communication. Dana was at the Salisbury Academy a few years ago. They conclude in their book, which you really need to read to understand the relationship between media and terrorism. The modern communication model used by terrorist organizations is audience-based. It's based on the audience they target. Meaning-centered, culture-dependent, and always tied into an ongoing narrative stream that is part of the socio-political context. What does this mean? This means that ISIS are not acting in vacuum. They took advantage of the political and ideological vacuum, but they are using our cultural values, our grievances, our own beliefs. They're using them against us. They're also using our own media and technology against us, to recruit us, to support them, to build their state. In the end, if you put all these things together, the mediated terrorism and populism strategies and tactics, you see that they achieve media exposure, which means more attention and credibility. They are also trying to generalize violence. I think that's one of the purposes of these cartoons, where people are blown up and there's shooting going around. Make violence more acceptable, eliminate the gray, make Muslims around the world more hated and more discriminated against, so that they are pushed closer and closer to us. Recruit and deter, that's the duality of terrorism. Using terrorism to scare people, but at the same time recruit more people. Build a community of supporters, and the final outcome, building a state and achieving power, whether it's in a political democratic way or in a non-democratic way, as ISIS has been doing. And I think we have, what, a couple more minutes for questions? All right, we'll take a couple more questions. A couple questions.
سؤالي هو على دور الإعلام مع الإرهاب. باغ اكزومبل في تونس عندنا مشكلة كصحفيين كي دخلنا نناقشوا في المسألة هذيا كصحفيين وخاصة مع السلطة، وقعنا في فخ إنه السلطة خاصة وزارة الداخلية ولات تعطي في دروس للصحافة كيفاش يتعاملوا مع الارهاب وكيفاش يغطيوا الارهاب، وهذا حل الباب لبرشا حاجات اخرى تمس الامن العام وعلاقه الصحافه يعني بالمسائل الامنيه وبتعامل الدوله مع الارهابيين، وخاصه مساله حقوق الانسان اكسترا. بنعرف شنو رايك انت في الموضوع هذا، وكيفاش انه يعني نحن كصحفيين نجموا نطرحوا الموضوع هذا على خاطر انت مشكله حقيقيه، وفي نفس الوقت نبينوا الفرق انه يعني لازم الميديا هما اللي يقرروا كيفاش يتعاملوا مع الارهاب.
Thank you. I'll just wait for the translation. So let me answer this quickly. There are books written on how to cover terrorism. What's the best strategies? And there's no consensus. There's no one agreement on how to do it. There's some common ground where we should not use sensationalism. We should not use graphic imagery that pushes and promotes their cause. That we should cover it in a way thinking of our main audiences, how to protect them, what is the news and information that they need to know. But that's what I said earlier, it's a dilemma. It puts you in a position where it's not your choosing to serve the terrorist. You cannot but serve the terrorist when you are covering it, or at least their cause. But to what extent do you serve them? This is where you can control as a journalist what to put, what not to put. But the problem today, with all the elements that I talked about, mass media losing revenues, no clear economic model, social media with everybody being able to put it, the logic today is that if you don't cover it, if you don't put the graphic imagery, somebody else is going to do it and is going to beat you to it, and is going to move the audiences towards that. In short, I don't have an answer. We're in a very difficult situation as journalists on how to cover not only terrorism, but also populism. How do you cover all these racist statements by these politicians in Europe, in the US, across the globe? Do you cover them? Do you not cover them? You don't cover them, somebody else is going to cover them, right? We're in a very difficult situation. Go ahead. Maybe I can take like 3 questions at a time to speed things up. Where's the microphone? Okay.
سؤالي احنا طبعا شفنا البرزنتيشن كان بروفيشنال درجه عاليه سواء من حيث الاعداد سواء من حيث البرامج حتى اختيار النصوص يعني كوسيله اعلاميه اذا غطينا هذا الحدث او لا فهم وصلوا رسالتهم اللي يريدون يوصلوها للعالم اجمع، لكن احنا اذا كوسيله اعلاميه اذا اردنا تغطيه هذه الاحداث وتغطيه هذه الجرائم الارهابيه ناخذها من صعيد محترف اخر، لكن بطريقه نقدر نوصلها للرسائل للمواطن العربي بالتحديد انه هذا التنظيم هو تنظيم ارهابي يريد يبث رسائل مشوهه عن صوره الاسلام للعالم، لكن انه نمنع تغطيه الوسائل الاعلام بشكل عام لتغطيه هذه البرامج لجرائم داعش، اتصور احنا هنا نوقع بمطب كبير راح يساهم تضليل الاعلام من جانب العرب، وراح يستغلون هذه النقطه داعش بانه اعلامكم دا يغطي جرائمنا، لانه احنا نريد نوصل رساله لكم انه انتم ما توصلكم كل اللي احنا نريد نوصلكم اياه، انتم عايشين بحاله من الظلام، بحاله من السواد، نخدمكم بطريقه احنا يمكن ما نعرف احنا قاعدين نخدمكم بيها. شكرا.
Thanks for the question. If CNN comes and tells you now, your government is corrupt, what's your first reaction? Yes, we know, maybe, right? If they come and attack your politician, but the politician that you actually support, CNN, I'm talking about CNN, or Fox News, let's use Fox News as an example. Fox News says your king, your president is corrupt. What's your reaction? Nobody now says this. Nobody now says I agree. The impulsive reaction is Western media biased against us, and you have some distrust level. Okay? If you have somebody who has already bought into the narrative of ISIS, okay, and you tell them ISIS is evil, ISIS is bad, and you're the mainstream media, guess what's going to happen? You're actually pushing them further. You're actually proving to them further and further that they are right, that you are biased against their beliefs, that you are anti-Muslim, that you are actually serving the evil side. you need to see both. You need to be able to put yourself in both sides of both shoes, right? If you are in an ISIS shoes, you already believe that this mass media is evil and is biased against Islam and is attacking Islam. You already have selective exposure and you're going to filter it out anyway. The other part, good luck with having media not cover it. Media are built on profit now. If they don't cover it, what are they going to cover? And someone else is going to cover it. It's the same logic, it's the same problem we are in. Okay, let's have multiple questions, sorry, so we don't take too much time from lunch, yes.
تحية طيبة، شكرا على العرض القيم. أود أن أسأل يعني كيف يصعب التعرف على هؤلاء رغم أننا درسنا مع الأستاذين بول ميهايليس والأستاذ موزس أن يعني الشبكة هي مفتوحة ويمكن التوصل إليهم بسهولة، يعني يمكن التعرف عليهم بسهولة. كذلك السؤال لا أطيل عليكم، الشق الثاني قد أجبت عليه وهو كيف لا نخدم الإرهابيين، كيف نحذر رغم أن يعني الدعاية في أزيائنا في طريقة حديثنا، فأنا عندما نتحدث عن أبل فأنا نحن نقوم بدعاية لها، إذا قد أجبت على هذا الشق وشكرا.
خليني آخذ 3 أسئلة ورا بعض.
إذا افترضنا أن من يحارب الإرهاب أو من يروج للإرهاب في سباق الوصول إلى الناس واكتساب مساحات، فإن من يروج للإرهاب باستخدام هذه الوسائل الحديثة والتقنيات الحديثة ربما كسب جزءا من هذا السباق يعني، واستطاع أن يصل إلى مساحات وإلى جمهور أوسع. السؤال هو لماذا لم يكن الذين يحاربون الإرهاب بنفس مستوى الانتباه لتأثير مثل هذه الرسالة الإعلامية واستخدام مثل هذه التقنيات، وبالتالي يعملون على التحجيم؟ لماذا المؤسسات الإعلامية يعني فتحت أبوابها لاستقبال مثل هذه الرسائل الإعلامية؟ شبكات التواصل الاجتماعي أيضا كان بإمكانها أن تلعب دورا كبيرا في الحد من إيصال هذه الرسالة، لأن من خطط لهذه الرسالة وجهزها بهذه الكيفية كان يعرف ما هو الأثر الذي سيحدث في أذهان الناس، وأن هذه الرسائل سيتم تداولها عبر هذه المواقع وتؤدي رسالة بث الذعر والرعب في نفوس الناس. الجزئية الأخيرة فقط، الوسائل الوسيطة، هناك مؤسسات إعلامية كانت وسيطة ما بين منتجي هذه الوسائل، هذه الرسائل الإعلامية وبين الجمهور، ولكن لم يتحدث عنها أحد. هي ساهمت بشكل مقصود في إظهار هذه الجماعات المتوحشة. هي طبعا تدعي أنها وسائل إعلامية محايدة وأنها مجرد ناقل للخبر أو للمعلومة أو لجزء من هذه الرسالة الإعلامية، لكنها كانت بقصد يعني ملحوظ تؤدي دورا وسيطا في إظهار وحشية وقوة هذه الجماعات.
في آخر كتاب لنعوم تشومسكي هاي السنة صدر، كتب من يحكم العالم أو من يملك العالم. حكى بأنه أي بلد أو أي حدا حاب يسيطر على أي ثروة بلد عليه بالصراع الديني. توضيح بس لداعش أو حتى إحنا الصراع اللي عايشين فيه، حتى إسرائيل هو الديانة اليهودية، داعش الديانة الإسلامية. بصرف النظر عن كل هذا، أنا من أصعب التجارب اللي مريت فيها في معهد الإعلام هو تحليل الفيلم لاستشهاد معاذ الكساسبة مع ناس محللين لغة جسد وناس سينمائيين. اكتشفنا بأنه الفيديو زائف، وأنه معاذ الكساسبة زائف. نعم.
شو يعني بس وضحي لي شو يعني زائف؟
أنا حأحكي هلا. زائف من ناحية أنه كان كله ميك اب والحرق كان مش حقيقي، هو قتل نعم، ولكن الفيديو كان منه هدف، والآن بحكي لحضراتكم شو الهدف ونجحوا فيه. أنه أول إشي كان الهدف في إثارة أو هي الإدارة الوحشية ونجحوا فيها، فكان كل الفيديو فيك. في التلفزيون الرسمي بعد ما تعود على منظر الحرق فصار في أحداث إرهابية في الأردن، التلفزيون الرسمي والناس على التواصل الاجتماعي اعتادوا على نشر المجرمين محروقين، وكمان كلمات يعني نائبة أو كلمات غير جيدة. فنجحوا داعش في إدارة الوحشية وإثارتها بين الناس حتى أنه وصلت للتلفزيون الرسمي المفروض أنه يكون كامل الأخلاقية أو يعني مهتم بالأخلاقيات الصحافية، بات ينشر هذه الصور لمجرمين بعيدا عن الإنسانية وهم محروقين.
شكرا. Thank you. Let me start from the end. I don't know if it's fake or not. I don't think it's fake, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's fake or not. It achieved its goals, right? There's this funny phenomenon, we even use it sometimes, called countering violent extremism. That's not the funny part. The funny part is that how can we counter violent extremism and beat them? Like we are countering something and we need to beat them. We are actually putting ourselves in a defensive position, a reactionary position to react to them, and we want to get ahead of them. How does that work? That doesn't work. What I'm trying to say here is if we want to counter this movement, we need to deal with the problem. We cannot deal with the symptoms. The symptoms are these messages, are these strategies, are these crimes. Dealing with that will not achieve anything. So it's funny when I met this group that gave us a lecture in Salzburg a few days ago, the Global Coalition Against Daesh. I think they use Daesh, saying that that's a more appropriate term, not knowing that it's exactly the same words as ISIS. But anyway, that's a different matter. But that lecture, and I told it to them in their face, so I'm not criticizing them behind their back, was a joke. And that group, the whole group was a joke. First, because when they put the map and put the same countries that supported ISIS financially and with military power as being the global coalition against ISIS, that's the first joke. The second joke is that the resources they put. Two people handling the media machine, the global coalition against Daesh, media machine against Daesh. Our own media team here is bigger than the global coalition's media team. There was no serious effort to counter ISIS up until a few months ago when they realized, oh shit, we can't control this anymore. At the beginning, well, ISIS is fighting Assad, right? The Assad regime, and Assad regime is my opponent, so it makes sense. Let's let them fight my battle, and maybe later we'll get rid of them. And suddenly ISIS is in every neighborhood, in every town, every city in the world. And that's when they realized, here we go again. We made the mistake with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan first, and now we're making this again. Let's go in and kick them out of their main cities, or we're gonna regret it later. So when all of this was happening, there was no serious effort to counter ISIS militarily, politically, economically, or anything, up until a few months ago. So this is why, first, the media counter on its own will not work, even if there was seriousness. And if there is seriousness, it cannot work on its own. It needs to be tackled politically, economically, militarily, from all levels to deal with the problem. But let me go one further step, and I will end on this and answer more questions outside. ISIS may be on its way out, but there will be another group that will learn from ISIS, use the same grievances that we all believe in. Do you remember that video they created about Sykes-Picot, where they tore the border between Syria and Iraq? I had friends in the room watching the video who are atheists, Christians, people who would never be extremists or would never subscribe. Oh my gosh, they did it. We've been trying to do this for 70 years and they did it. This was the reaction. They build on our own grievances, on existing problems. If we do not solve the problems, if we do not solve the authoritarianism, the bad economic state, the puppet regimes, the Palestinian issue, all the other issues in the Arab world, somebody is going to come and build on these grievances again and create a superstructure like ISIS, and they're going to be learning from the past. They're going to be learning from people who came before them, and they're going to get more and more savvy and more powerful. I hope this group that will come in the future will be a benevolent, democratic group that supports freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and people's individual and communal freedom of beliefs. So the problem right now, the biggest problem we have right now, we have a vacuum in ideology. All the ideologies that we believed in are bankrupt. There's only this. After this is gone, what else do we have? Okay? I hope that your generation, especially the young students here, will work on this. We'll create this fifth democratic wave, with an ideology for all of us to believe in. A better life for everyone. Believe in whatever you want to believe in. Just live and let live. And let's build this together in order to counter these hateful solutions. We need a better solution. Dealing with it on a media level, maybe it's like giving Advil or Panadol for a headache. You have to deal with the problem, not with the symptom, not with the headache. You have to deal with the cancer that is inside us. And thank you. I want you all to go and have lunch. I'll be outside if you want to have any more questions. Thanks for listening.